each. Click, call, or visit a Spectrum store today.
We said we'd never break the 3-second rule. Never do that. And never become a minivan mom.
Hey, Chris.
As parents, we say never a lot, but never happens. So when you say you'd never leave your child in a hot car, know it can happen. Before you leave the car, always stop, look, lock.
Good morning, I'm Bree Driscoll, and here's your Spectrum News in 90. Tariffs on all imported steel and aluminum are officially in effect. They apply to all countries, but will especially affect Canada, the nation's top supplier of both metals. In the ongoing trade war, Ontario threatened a 25% surcharge on electricity exports to Michigan, Minnesota, and New York yesterday. President Donald Trump responded by upping the metal tax to 50%. Both countries have since suspended the new levies. The Education Department announces it is cutting nearly 50% of its workforce. Senior agency officials report the roughly 1,300 employees notified of their layoff will be terminated in 90 days. That's in addition to hundreds who accepted a buyout deal in recent weeks. Education Secretary Linda McMahon says the reduction in force ensures resources are directed where they matter most, to students, parents, and teachers. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says his country has accepted a 30-day ceasefire proposed by the United States. The deal covers the entire front line of the fighting with Russia. The U.S. says in a joint statement with Ukraine it would immediately lift the pause on intelligence sharing and resume security assistance to Ukraine. Russia has yet to accept the deal. That's your Spectrum News in 90.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. I'm meteorologist Ramel Carpenter with your weather on the One's forecast. Another beautiful spring-like day from the central U.S. to the southeast, where highs are going to be in the upper 70s, low 80s, running about 22 degrees above the average for this time of year for some areas. Low 80s across the Raleigh region as well as in Texas, but out west, that's where things are going to continue to stay unsettled. We have this atmospheric river bringing in multiple rounds of rain, and we're going to talk about that in more detail coming up in 10 minutes.
Thank you for joining us here on Spectrum News. I'm Bree Driscoll. Today is Wednesday, March 12th. Tariffs on all imported steel and aluminum are officially in effect as of today. They apply to all countries, but will significantly affect Canada, the nation's top supplier of both metals. Auto prices could go up as a result. Prices may also rise for appliances, machinery, medical devices, and more. Domestic steel and aluminum producers could benefit from the tariffs. U.S. companies might be willing to pay more for their metal in order to avoid a 25% tax. Spectrum's Angie Gonzalez has the latest from Washington.
Ready? Today, Secretary of State Marco Rubio is in Canada for a meeting with G7 foreign ministers. Representatives from 7 of the world's most advanced economies and the European Union are coming together amid a brewing trade war between the U.S. and many of its allies. This morning, the Trump administration began implementing a 25% tariff on all steel and aluminum imports into the U.S., a move the president says is already producing results.
We have car companies that are not building in Mexico now. They're building in the United States. Some of them, the plants were already started and they stopped construction. And now they're going to build in the United States.
Mexico and Canada are 2 of the biggest producers of steel used in the U.S., but the new tariffs also extend to metals imported from the European Union. Now EU members have announced their own countermeasures, saying they'll be enacting their own tariffs on industrial and agricultural products from the U.S. beginning April 1st.
As the United States are applying tariffs worth $28 billion,
We are responding with countermeasures worth 26 billion euros.
Reps for the EU say they're always open to negotiation. And while the Trump administration says there are no exceptions, the president has backed off other tariffs in recent weeks. He was initially poised to double the new tariff on metals from Canada after officials from one Canadian province threatened a tax on electricity it provides to homes in Minnesota, New York, and Michigan. Both sides have since backed down.
With any negotiation that we have, there's a point that both parties are heated and the temperature needs to come down. And I thought this was the right decision.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford is now scheduled to meet with Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick here in Washington Thursday. They'll discuss trade agreements between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. In Washington, Angie Gonzalez, Spectrum News.
The Education Department is starting to reduce its staff. Roughly 1,300 employees will be laid off within 90 days, with the addition of hundreds who accepted separation packages in recent weeks and dozens of probationary workers who were terminated last month. The workforce is being cut nearly in half. Spectrum's Daniel Grimes is in Washington with the latest.
I'd like it to be closed immediately. Look, the Department of Education's a big con job.
President Donald Trump is slashing the workforce at the Department of Education, moving one step closer to his goal of closing the department altogether and shifting education to the states, a move that would likely lead to legal challenges as the department was created by Congress, meaning the legislative branch is the only one that can dismantle it. More than 1,300 workers at the Education Department, which manages student loans and enforces civil rights laws in schools like Title IX, learned Tuesday they would be laid off. The cuts are in addition to the 63 probationary employees fired last month and the hundreds who took one of the voluntary separation incentives. The Education Secretary issued a statement saying in part the move is, quote, ensuring that resources are directed where they matter most, to students, parents, and teachers.
I think the president made it very clear that he thought that the Department of Education, should totally go away, and he said that my successful job will be to put myself out of a job. So, when I'm working to fulfill that mandate.
Now, there was a bit of confusion earlier Tuesday when a memo went out to all employees telling them the office would be closed Tuesday through Wednesday for security reasons. It will reopen on Thursday. In Washington, Daniel Grimes, Spectrum News.
Ukraine accepts a 30-day ceasefire proposal by the United States. Now the strike to end the 3-year war falls on Russia. Spectrum's Jenna Enoch explains.
After more than 8 hours in a Saudi Arabian hotel, Ukrainian officials accept a ceasefire deal proposed by the United States, a crucial first step towards ending the Russia-Ukraine war.
Ukraine accepts this proposal. We consider it positive. We are ready to take such a step, and the United States of America must convince Russia to do so. That is, we agree. And if the Russians agree, the silence will work at that very moment.
The ceasefire covers the entire front line of the fighting with Russia, not just the air and sea. Following the meeting, the United States announced it would lift the pause on intelligence sharing and resume security assistance to Ukraine. Now the ball is in Russia's court.
We're going to take the offer to them. We're going to tell them this is what's on the table. Ukraine is ready to stop shooting and start talking. And now it'll be up to them to say yes or no. I hope they're going to say yes. And if they do, then I think we made great progress. If they say no, then we'll unfortunately know what the impediment is to peace here.
President Trump plans to speak with Russian President Vladimir Putin about the plan this week. The ceasefire proposal comes at a time when Moscow forces continue to advance in the Kursk region of Russia, where Ukraine launched a shock incursion back in August. Jenna Enoch, Spectrum News.
The House passes a spending bill to avert a government shutdown Friday night. It will now go to the Senate, where at least 8 Democrats would need to vote with the GOP to accept it.
I certainly hope that there are enough Democrats in the Senate who have a conscience who will do the right thing by the American people and take care of business over there.
Though House Democrats aren't confident senators will vote that way.
So I don't know why a Democrat would look at this and decide they want to be on that side of the ledger.
Senate Democrats will hold a meeting today where they are expected to discuss their position on the House GOP funding plan. A lesson from a devastating crash coming up, what the NTSB is recommending after a mid-air collision between a helicopter and a plane in Washington, D.C. killed 67.
Weather can be beautiful, inconvenient, and at times, powerful. And it affects everything we do. At Spectrum News Plus, our weather experts update you with the information and the context you need so you can better plan your day. And we do it every 10 minutes. We're the calm in the storm. Weather on the Ones on Spectrum News Plus, exclusively on Spectrum. And get your weather anytime on the Spectrum News app.
I really am in the middle of nowhere. Every day is different. Chores, come on, homeschooling, and then I fit in the rug business. I just got a new batch of rugs that I'd love to show you. I have a website, and a lot of what I do is sharing my home life. Mommy's leaving. Reliable, high-speed internet is the foundation of our business. Spectrum was great. They went out of their way to make sure that I was okay and I was taken care of. Shoo! And that's the awesomeness of having Spectrum.
You're not gonna get it all right. Just make sure you nail the big stuff.
Mama!
Like making sure your kids are in the right seat for their age and size. Get it right at nhtsa.gov/the-right-seat.
Even the mighty might not see it coming. It's prediabetes, and it captures 1 in 3 adults. But you can escape. Take the 1-minute prediabetes risk test to know where you stand and prevent or delay type 2 diabetes. Be your own hero on smartphones everywhere at doihaveprediabetes.org.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm meteorologist Ramel Carpenter with your Weather on the Ones forecast. We are halfway through the week and we have another taste of spring in store for us across the central U.S. all the way into portions of the southeast. It's been pretty quiet of late with the exception of the Southern California and Arizona region. The last 24 hours we have been seeing some rain, a widespread swath of an inch and a half from LA to Phoenix, and that's certainly going to lead to some flooding concerns. And we have flash flood watches in effect across Southern California until we get towards Thursday afternoon, and could get extended into the day on Friday as well. Given the setup, we're expecting multiple rounds of rainfall along the western coast. But across the rest of the country, though, going to be dry and quiet until we get towards the end of the week when our storm system is going to be bringing a pretty significant threat for severe thunderstorms across the Midwest by the time we get towards Friday evening. But across the western coast, that's where active weather is on this Wednesday. We have some of that rainfall working its way into Arizona, which is not necessarily leading to some flooding concerns. This is going to be pretty light in nature as it continues to work its way across portions of the southwestern U.S. But our atmospheric river is just getting started, and you'll notice that moisture coming in. This is the water vapor imagery. You can really see the atmospheric moisture coming in from the Pacific, working its way up from California all the way through Oregon and Washington, where we are expecting a good amount of rain and some snowfall for some of the higher elevations. The Sierra Nevadas, the higher elevations of the Cascades as well, could easily see 2 to 3 plus feet of snowfall as a result of this atmospheric river. We're going to see that continuing through the evening hours today, and then into our Thursday morning, we're seeing widespread rain across Southern California, some pockets of moderate to even heavy rainfall, which is why we have those flash flood watches in effect for California. Rain will be off and on throughout the day, and then again into our Friday morning commute, we're going to be dealing with that wet weather and likely going to see a swath of rainfall between 2 to 3 plus inches of rainfall all along the western coast. Now, as we transition into the end of this week, I mentioned the threat for severe thunderstorms will be arriving for many areas across the eastern U.S. We'll talk about that in more detail coming up in 10 minutes.
Look at what you need to know. Tariffs on all imported steel and aluminum are in effect. They apply to all countries, but will especially impact Canada, the nation's top supplier of both metals. The Education Department announces it is cutting nearly 50% of its workforce. Senior agency officials report the roughly 1,300 employees notified of their layoff will be terminated in 90 days. That's in addition to hundreds who accepted a buyout deal in recent weeks. Ukraine's president says his country has accepted a 30-day ceasefire proposed by the U.S. Russia has yet to accept the deal. And that's a look at what you need to know this morning. The Department of Homeland Security's ad campaign geared towards immigration is costing taxpayers millions. According to the Associated Press, DHS has already spent more than $16 million on the campaign, the White House bypassing a traditional bidding process to award contracts worth nearly $200 million to two Republican-linked ad firms. The campaign, which features DHS Secretary Kristi Noem and highlights the Trump administration's increased efforts to deport immigrants, launched last month. The ad has aired in several major markets, including Los Angeles, New York, and Miami. Following the arrest of Mahmoud Khalil, the White House says it will be going after other pro-Palestinian protesters. During a briefing yesterday, the White House press secretary said the administration is seeking intelligence from the Department of Homeland Security. The goal is to identify other international students who may have participated in protests against the Israel-Hamas war last year. The press secretary also doubled down on President Trump's recent rhetoric by referring to the protests as, quote, illegal activity. He is currently being detained in Louisiana despite being a legal green card holder. The National Transportation Safety Board is issuing its preliminary report on the deadly plane collision at Ronald Reagan National Airport. Officials are calling on the FAA to permanently close a Washington, D.C. helicopter route due to the collision risk it poses. Spectrum's Chris Welch has the details.
The NTSB's Jennifer Hamady says the distance between helicopters and planes on their routes near Reagan National Airport is simply too close. And she says it's led to too many close calls over the last several years. And of course, it resulted in tragedy on January 29th. Well, she says that route should be permanently closed.
We've determined that the existing separation distances between helicopter traffic operating on Route 4 and aircraft landing on runway 33 are insufficient and pose an intolerable risk to aviation safety by increasing the chances of a mid-air collision at DCA.
Hamady went on to say that she was, quote, angry and that it should not take a tragedy to require action. Well, Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy seemed to agree. In a subsequent press conference, he confirmed that the helicopter route will remain closed, at least for right now. Under the current rules, helicopters and planes can be as close as 75 feet apart. Investigators say that between 2021 and 2024, there were more than 15,000 instances of planes getting alerts about helicopters being in close proximity. Here is how Duffy reacted to those figures.
Does it piss me off? Yes. And that's not an appropriate word maybe for a secretary to use, but of course. That the data was there, it wasn't effectively analyzed. To see that we had this kind of risk at DCA makes me angry.
And in the wake of a number of subsequent aviation incidents in the U.S., both Hamady and Duffy stressed the fact that flying remains the safest means of travel. Vehicles, they remind us, result in over 40,000 deaths each year. Chris Welch, Spectrum News.
The stock market continues to be a roller coaster ride as we wait to see how the market responds to steel and aluminum tariffs going into effect today. Yesterday, all three stock indices dropped after threats of a new round of hefty tariffs on Canada. Yet by the afternoon, markets had gained back some losses. The Dow closing down 1.1%. The broader S&P 500 fell nearly 0.8%, and the Nasdaq Composite fell nearly 0.2%. Pope Francis is continuing to recover from pneumonia. The Vatican revealing this morning the Pope had yet another quiet night of rest. Earlier this week, the 88-year-old received a positive prognosis and was cleared from being in, quote, imminent danger. A federal judge is asked to intervene amid claims the U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID, plans on destroying records. A recent email from USAID's acting executive secretary allegedly instructed staff to begin clearing out and destroying classified documents this week. But that order is being challenged as a part of a lawsuit against the Trump administration's efforts to dismantle the agency. Unions representing the workforce will meet with the judge this morning to brief him on the case. Government officials will also be in attendance. The department has yet to comment on the alleged email's instructions. A much anticipated homecoming from outer space, how NASA's astronauts are finally returning to Earth after 9 months in space. Just ahead here on Spectrum News.
Spectrum News Plus. News from a new perspective, dedicated to refreshing storytelling and empowering communities across the nation. With balanced reporting, providing real context and in-depth coverage 24 hours a day.
Here's a look at your forecast across the country.
Local stories, connecting communities. We are Spectrum News Plus. Streaming now on the Spectrum News app and free with your Spectrum subscription.
Starting a business is hard. You have to stay connected at all times.
As we've been growing the studio, Spectrum's been there every step of the way. I'm always able to make the phone call that I need. I'm able to shoot that text message or that email. Every vital piece of equipment that we have here uses Spectrum.
Fast, reliable internet, starting at $40 a month, backed by the Spectrum commitment to keep your business connected.
Food isn't just fuel to live, it's fuel to grow. My family relied on public assistance to help provide meals for us. These meals fueled my involvement in theater and the arts as a child, which fostered my love for acting. The Feeding America network of food banks helps millions of people put food on the table. When people are fed, futures are nourished. Join the movement to end hunger, and together we can open endless possibilities for people to thrive. Visit feedingamerica.org/act now.
You're not going to get it all right. Just make sure you nail the big stuff, like making sure your kids are in the right seat for their age and size. Get it right at nhtsa.gov/the-right-seat.
Good Wednesday morning, everybody. I'm meteorologist Ramel Carpenter with your weather on the Ones forecast. We are halfway through the week and we have some unsettled weather to talk about across the western half of the country. We have an atmospheric river that's going to bring multiple rounds of rainfall and some heavy snowfall for some of the higher elevations of the Sierra Nevadas and into the Cascades, where we could easily see over 3, maybe even 4 feet of snow for some of those areas. But as far as rainfall totals, likely going to be around that 2 to 3 inch range, where we have some flooding concerns down into Southern California. Elsewhere, though, spring-like weather is going to continue. We have temperatures running about 20 plus degrees above the average in parts of the central U.S. And as we get towards the end of this week, that is certainly going to help fuel some thunderstorms. Multi-day severe weather threat on the cards as we get towards the end of the week, lasting into this weekend. And we'll touch on that here in just a moment. But in the near term, though, quiet weather is going to continue. Make plans to get outside if you live across the central U.S. into the eastern coast. Western coast is going to continue to stay unsettled with temperatures running several degrees below the average as a result of that atmospheric river. We do have a weaker storm system working its way into portions of the central plains that could bring a low-level threat for severe weather. Main concern with this is going to be damaging wind gusts, but the better threat for severe thunderstorms will be arriving Friday evening. And this level 3 enhanced risk stretches from Illinois down through Tennessee and to portions of Alabama and into Mississippi as well. The time frame for this does look to be later in the night, so make sure you have multiple ways of receiving severe weather alerts, damaging wind gusts, the threat for tornadoes, and even large hail, all possibilities for us as we transition into Friday. And that severe weather threat is going to shift more towards the deep south and eventually into the eastern coast as we get into Saturday and again into our Sunday. Similar concerns, damaging winds, some hail, and again, tornado threat will be around as we get towards this upcoming weekend. So make sure you're staying weather aware if you have any plans to be out and about. But as we get into the end of the night tonight, this storm system I talked about working its way across the Midwest and into Arkansas, the Mississippi River Valley, could bring some damaging wind gusts to start things off on Thursday, and eventually working its way across Georgia and into the Tennessee Valley. But again, not expecting widespread severe weather by any means. Watch what happens though in the Midwest though. Our next storm system comes, and this is the one that's going to be bringing us that big time threat for severe thunderstorms, damaging wind gusts north of 60 miles per hour, and that tornado threat will be around as well. Elsewhere though, we have a beautiful taste of spring over the next couple of days. Temperatures will be flirting with the 90s across portions of Texas and Florida, and across the Midwest we are going to see those highs running well over above the average by about 20 plus degrees. And this warm weather looks to stick around for most of the eastern half of the country as we get to the end of the month.
Southwest Airlines is packing up and ditching one of its most popular perks. The company is revamping its free checked bags policy. The airline will charge for the first and second checked bags starting on May 28th. Members of the company's A-List loyalty program or business flyers are exempt from the fees. Southwest has not yet revealed how much checked bags will cost. President Donald Trump went shopping for a new Tesla on the White House driveway yesterday. He chose a red sedan to show his support for Elon Musk's electric vehicle company. Trump was seen climbing into a Model S with Musk in the passenger seat. Trump said he hopes his purchase will boost Tesla, which has been struggling with declining stock prices. This is the latest example of Musk's blurred role in the government. NASA's 2 astronauts are expected to finally return to Earth as soon as Sunday after 9 months on the International Space Station. The 2 flew to the ISS last June on Boeing's new Starliner capsule, which had equipment failures and flew back empty. Spectrum's Ariel Wessler has more from the pilots who are looking forward to coming home.
The hardest part is, having the folks on the ground have to not know exactly when we're coming back.
Speaking at a recent news conference, astronaut Sunny Williams talked about her much-anticipated homecoming.
So I have 2 Labrador retrievers right now, Gunner and Rotor, who have been having boy time with my husband, and I think they'll be very happy for Mom to come home.
This is the 3rd trip to the International Space Station for her and Butch Wilmore.
Crew 9.
The 2 test pilots were only supposed to be gone a week, but their Boeing Starliner space capsule had so many problems, NASA ruled it too dangerous to carry anyone, and it flew back empty.
We came up prepared to stay long, even though we planned to stay short. That's what we do in human spaceflight. That's what your nation's human spaceflight program is all about, planning for unknown, unexpected contingencies.
Officials said there wasn't a way to bring the pair back earlier on SpaceX without interrupting other scheduled missions. Both Wilmore and Williams are retired Navy captains and took a spacewalk together in January.
Sunny's a great crewmate. She's just an awesome person.
Retired astronaut Danny Olivas and Williams were part of the same class at NASA.
We're affectionately referred to as the Penguins because they said we were never going to fly. And then you look at Sunny now, and she's got the record for the Penguins in space.
Williams was on board the space station in 2007 when Olivas flew his first shuttle mission and brought her back home. He says NASA made the right call to leave the astronauts in orbit.
We need to make sure that before we put human beings on spacecraft, we want to know that it's going to function the way it's supposed to.
Crew 10 is expected to launch Wednesday on the Dragon capsule. The 2 crews will spend a few days together on the ISS before Wilmore and Williams head home with astronaut Nick Hague and cosmonaut Alexander Gorbanov. Wilmore says he thinks the issues they encountered with Starliner will help improve space travel for future astronauts.
I think Sunny and I, even though we only rode uphill, we only did our tests uphill, I think we've done that for Starliner.
Because Wilmore and Williams will be wearing generic SpaceX flight suits when they ride home on Dragon, the outfits won't have their names. Williams said, quote, "That's okay, we're just Butch and Sunny. Everyone knows who we are by now." Ariel Wessler, Spectrum News.
We're sure they'll receive a very warm welcome when they touch down back on Earth. I'm Bree Driscoll. Thanks so much for watching. Your Spectrum News in 90 is coming up right after this short break. Stay with us.
I tell my son, I love you every single day. I love you. Now, my dad has never said that to me. Not because he doesn't love me, but because culturally it wasn't comfortable for him. Now that he's a grandfather, he says, I love you to my son every time he sees him. My advice to all the fathers out there, forget the cultural restrictions. They grow up way too fast for you to waste even a single precious moment.
It's game time at the arena, and 20,000 fans are looking for a win. With an ultra-high-speed network and seamless Wi-Fi, fans can get in the door fast and share the game's best moments in real time. And with Spectrum Business committed to keeping them connected 100% of the time, they won't miss a second of the action. A secure, reliable connection from Spectrum Business means the fan experience is a guaranteed win.
Sometimes in life, in order to move forward, it helps to look back. To learn from the pioneers and trailblazers.
to gain inspiration from those who came before us.
To show us what it means to act with empathy and to show that love has no labels.
Join WWE and Love Has No Labels throughout the year in celebrating people from all communities and heritages.
Because when love has no labels, that's a love we can all fight for.
Women are bad with money. That's what the world's been saying for centuries. But now we've got something to say.
Save it. It's time to save ourselves by saving our money.
Until we're no longer 80% more likely than men to live in poverty in retirement.
Save it. The falsehoods, the feelings of fault.
Then, the funds. Learn how to save for your retirement at WeSaySaveIt.org.